Hi there, welcome to Bourbon Turntable. This is the show that blends the love of music with the love of whiskey. Tonight, we're going to be a little more whiskey focused than music focused, actually, a lot more, but more about that in a minute. Before we get into that, I want to tell you about Bar Cart Co-op. Bar Cart Co-op is a collection of friends who produce content for the whiskey enthusiast, people like yourself. We have shows like Distillers Talk with Alan Bishop and Christy Atkinson. They talk with distillers from across the country and around the world about anything and everything in terms of distillation. Alan has a couple other shows you want to check out. One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute. If you've got a question about distillation, you can ask Alan. Pose your question to him, send him a message. He'll post a video response, and we'll all learn from you and your curiosity and your willingness to ask a question. Alan also has a show called If You Have Ghosts, You Have Everything. I'll just say, you just got to check it out, okay? You just got to check it out. It's not about whiskey. It's about all kinds of other things out in the paranormal. But check it out. Very interesting, fascinating guest there. You will want to tune in to see what is going on there. My Whiskey Den every Monday night, 9 o'clock Eastern, 8 o'clock Central Time with Pat, Mike, and Mitch. They have some fun tastings. They have some really cool guests. Fred Swanson from Dancing Goat was on there recently. Man, he was a lot of fun. Super, super guy. So check them out every Monday night. Hang out in the chat. It gets really snarky sometimes. Whiskey in My Wedding Ring with David Levine. David is an excellent writer, does some fantastic reviews as well of spirits that you need to know about. He also does a podcast where he will interview distillers about the things you may be drinking. We also have our little show, Bourbon Turntable. If you're listening right now on YouTube, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We would love for you to join us every week. You can also listen on your favorite podcast platforms. So tonight is going to be very whiskey focused, as I mentioned. And that focus is going to be about really some news items in the whiskey world and kind of the state of affairs in the whiskey market as a whole. We will be getting back into some music pretty much big time the next probably 3 shows. We've got a show coming up with a band out of Texas called the Weathered Souls. Interesting journey this band has been on. The new music they've got coming out is just excellent. Excellent stuff. Good friend Dusty Bowe has a new album coming out soon. I've been able to listen to that. And I'm telling you, it is super, super stuff. Dusty's doing some really cool videos. He's got one coming out really soon with a song of his called Life is a Joke. And it's pretty good stuff. You'll want to see that video as well. And then doing a drummers special. We've done these shows in the past where we've had a panel of bass players and a panel of guitarists come on, and we'll talk to them about what they do. But we'll also get their thoughts and opinions on their favorite guitarist, bass player, in this case, drummers. Our panel is going to be Dylan Turner of Parker Barrow, Brian Mullins of the Cold Stairs, and Steve Gorman of the Black Crows and various other bands such as Trigger Hippie and Bagmen and whatever really cool project he may be working on right now that hopefully we'll find out a little bit about. But that'll be a lot of fun. That'll be coming up in a couple of weeks too. So be sure to check that out. As for what I'm drinking tonight, I'm drinking this MB Roland single barrel, and it was a special release for Hope Scarves. You see that? Hope Scarves. They do great work for cancer patients. And they are very, they act out in terms of encouraging those that have been hit with a cancer diagnosis. They also do a lot, raise a lot of money towards research and treatment. They have an event coming up on September 19th It's called the Colors of Courage event. If you are in the Louisville area, you try to attend. You can get tickets. You can go to hopescarves.org, which you can see there at the bottom of my screen, hopescarves.org. They'll do a bottle pull there. So you can also help by donating bottles. So they'll sell chances for people to pull bottles, to pull a number, and that number is associated with the bottle that's been donated. You can help by donating bottles. I've done that the last couple, 3 years. Did not get to make the event last year, got to make it the year before. I was fortunate enough and lucky enough to be on the panel that picked this bottle for them last year from the fine folks down at MB Roland. I'm a big fan of what they do. This is pretty darn tasty stuff. So that is what I'll be drinking this evening. All right. So let's get into talking about the state of things in whiskey. Now, what you're seeing a lot of lately is doom and gloom and bad news. And that's because there's been some bad news. But a lot of it is selective regurgitation of the same stories over and over and over again. But let's just kind of walk through the issues that have been prominent in the news, and then I think there are some conclusions we can draw based upon what we've been seeing so far. So I'll run this by you. I don't claim to be an economist. I am a CPA by trade, and I don't claim to be an expert in any of this, but I don't think I'm a dummy either. So let's give it a try. Luca Mariano, they were building a substantial distillery project down in Danville, Kentucky. Previously, they'd been sourcing their product and bottling it under their name. And in July, just maybe a month ago, they filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They had a total of $35 million in debt on a construction project that was estimated to be between $20 and $50 million. Now, in that debt, you're going to probably have some construction costs, certainly, that have not been paid. You're also going to have some operating costs that have been supported through lines of credit of some sort. Because when you're starting a distillery, you've got to have cash to fund not just the construction of the distillery, but the operations of that distillery as well. So all the stories and the legal documents point to about $35 million in debt, most of that being to primary lenders, some of that being to contractors and other vendors and suppliers. So that was one that came up recently. Garrard County, it is pronounced Garrard, not Gerard or Gerard, as it may look to be spelled. This is a state that also pronounces it for sales. So, you just kind of get what you get here. But Garrard County Distillery, they started building, I think, in around COVID, start of COVID, 2020, 2021. They first started filling barrels in late 2024. And by April of 2025, it shut down. It's a $250 million project in total. About $26 million in debt that's owed. They have been, liens have been filed by the contractor on the project. They have ceased operations at this point. They had a brand called All Nations, which was sourced whiskey. Some say that it's from the Wilderness Trail. Some say it's from multiple distilleries, Wilderness Trail, Beam, other places. So at any rate, they were sourcing product, putting it in a bottle called All Nations. None of the product that's on store shelves came out of off their still. They're very, very expensive still. This was a company out of Atlanta called Staghorn that was behind the project. They made a real high-profile hire in Lisa Wicker as their master distiller, and probably before the ink was dry on Lisa's contract, they ended up letting her go because they shut down operations. So this has all the feel to me as they had a bunch of people involved that may not have had a whole lot of experience in the industry. They spent a whole lot of money, that they didn't have. And when you hire somebody, of Lisa's reputation, and then immediately shut down, that just stinks of mismanagement. Not by Lisa, because Lisa wasn't there, but of the people that were running Garrett County Distilling. I think I need a drink. Good stuff. The first one to really make big news was back in November of 24, when Kentucky Owl, Stoley Group USA, which owned Kentucky Owl, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. This was supposed to be Bourbon Disneyland, $150 million theme park distillery was supposed to be built. And they're sitting with, between the news stories say, between $50 and $100 million in debt. A whole lot of that was owed to Bardstown Bourbon Company, very prominent and successful contract distiller. So, what's going to happen with the Kentucky Owl? I don't know. I don't know that that's necessarily salvageable, but stranger things have happened. Then, May of this year, Whiskey House, which is a gigantic contract distiller, they shut down. It's taking in totals around $120 million project, and they got nailed with some liens from construction contractors. And shortly, that was in May, and I think by the middle of June, late June, they had a deal with a new contractor to come in and build state-of-the-art rick houses. Apparently, some new rick house technology that they've got. So, I don't know. Sounds like they may turn things around at Whiskey House, and good luck to them. Then, kind of on top of all of that, kind of intermingled into it, is just distilleries such as Bullet and Diageo Distillery. They've shut down operations for a period of time. Several distilleries have done cutbacks in personnel. So everybody's trying to adapt to a new normal. Most recently, just in the past week or so, news broke of Farm Credit Services in Kentucky filing a $100 million lawsuit against the Nearest Green distillery. Allegations of fraud, significant overstatement of assets, misuse of funds, including the purchase of a $2.2 million home in Martha's Vineyard, various loan covenant violations. When you take out a loan with the bank, if you're a business, oftentimes there'll be guardrails in that document that will say, you'll have income levels of X, or you'll have net worth levels of Y, or you'll have certain metrics, that will be measured. How, I won't get too deep in the accounting piece of it, but there'll be metrics that'll be set up that are very easily measurable both by the borrower and the lender, and time frames throughout the year, or maybe once a year, where those are measured. And as long as you're in compliance with that, everybody's happy. If you're not in compliance with that, then you have a problem. And in many cases, those loan covenant violations can be forgiven, and any action that the bank might take to foreclose on that loan would be abated. So there were multiple loan covenant violations alleged by Farm Credit Services, and they were in Nearest Green Distillery was in a forbearance agreement with the bank, which means, okay, as long as things don't get worse, basically reset those loan covenants. As long as things don't get worse, we're not going to foreclose. Well, the defaults continued, and the bank finally filed suit for $100 million against the distillery, the weavers, that founders of the distillery. And they're wanting to put it in receivership, which means that somebody else comes in and runs it. So in response to that, the distillery, specifically the weavers, have alleged that all of the fraud was the fault of their former CFO. He had overstated all the assets and allowed them to obtain additional lines of credit, which that very well may be the case. They may not have been aware that that was going on. They claim that the bank was aware that they had of the property in Martha's Vineyard, which after they bought that property with funds that the bank had loaned to be used for the distillery, they also turned around and got a mortgage on that Martha's Vineyard property from a different bank. That's a no-no. They also allegedly took several thousand barrels of whiskey that were in their inventory, sold that to third parties in order to get capital. Well, those barrels were part of the collateral of Farm Credit Services. Again, another big no-no. But all the allegations from, or all of the responses from the distillery have been to blame the CFO, point the finger at him, say, we didn't do anything wrong, and anything that was wrong, the bank already knew about. We'll see how this plays out. There's a whole lot of smoke for there not to be some fire, but we'll see. And honestly, I've never been a big fan of that brand. I don't know the owners. I don't know the high-ranking executives, but I do know that for a series of years and encounters with their representatives, I've found them to be very, let's just say, deceptive. In 2021, I believe they started. They say that they started actually. They now say that they started actually using the distillery that they built down in Tennessee, the primary distillery, not the secondary distillery that they built in Shelbyville, Tennessee. But they started building that distillery, or they started bottling from that distillery in 2021. And years before that, even when product first started coming out, I would see their people out at events, would ask them about their product, and they would very consistently insist that this was their product that they distilled. And everybody knew that was false, but they wouldn't back off of that. And this happened not once, but twice, at least 3 or 4 times. Most recently at Bourbon on the Banks festival over in Frankfurt. This was probably 2 years ago. 2023, I guess. And I'd basically written off the brand because I don't care if you source, but just be very transparent about it. But I thought, okay, they're there. I'll visit their tent, try their product, see how it is, and strike up a conversation. And so went over, was talking with the sales rep that was there, marketing rep that was there. And again, I understand these people may not know everything, but they should know this. Okay, this is basic stuff. And it wasn't like you see at some of these things where it's, they hire a real pretty girl to stand there and pour drinks, and they don't even know may not even know who the brand was before the day they showed up. Okay. These were people that worked for the distillery. And one of them was kind of probably a lower ranking guy. And one of the guys I think he was some sort of brand ambassador type that was an employee and covered a territory, at least based on what I could gather from our conversation. And so I was trying one of the products, and I asked the question, when will you start releasing whiskey that was distilled at your distillery? And the response was, well, what you're drinking is. No, there's no way. At best, it would have been 2-year-old whiskey, and that wasn't 2-year-old whiskey. I think it even had an age statement on it. And but I may be wrong about that, but it was certainly not 2-year-old whiskey. And I said, no, this is not from your still. And he insisted that it was, and then went on to insist that everything they've ever produced was off their still, which anybody with any sense would know better. And then he brought over the brand ambassador level guy, and he basically doubled down on it. And later in the day, I was in line at one of the food trucks, and they came up behind me and were in line and struck up another conversation. And so basically the same conversation, part 2. And I wasn't just going to pass it off as, well, yeah, you must be right. You are, everything you ever produced is off of your still, because I know that's not true. And then the conversation shifted to, well, you don't understand how much it takes to get a distillery started. Okay. And then it was basically, they bowed the knee and said, okay, yeah, we weren't telling the truth. Our distillery has not been up and running, and we've spent a whole lot on marketing and visitor centers and things of that nature, which is fine if that's what you want to do, but don't try to pull one over on somebody, anybody, that you are something that you're not. If you want to go back, and I'll post it in the comments to this show. If you want to go back and watch the show, one of the last shows I did with David Levine, David had always had a really good relationship, or so he thought, with the people at Nearest Green. and he asked a question about some labeling on a new rye product that they put out, and he was basically told, "You need to talk to our lawyers if you want an answer." Okay. That's not how you handle that simple question. It's just not. Be more gracious, be more transparent than that. Um, it will be interesting to see how this plays out. It will be interesting to see how big whiskey media handles this. When they first the first Uncle Nearest product was released, um, one prominent whiskey writer, I won't say his name, but it rhymes with Med Frenick. He had posted on Instagram about this is great. This is exciting. This is a great whiskey. And then he went on to say, I can't wait to try it. So I just posted a comment. I said, how do you know it's a great whiskey if you haven't tried it? And his response back to me, and credit him for giving a response, was, well, you just must not know their story. Well, I did know the story. And you know the story too. And anybody that's, been the least bit interested in anything whiskey in the last, 8, 9 years, they're going to know this story. And, but the story has nothing to do with the quality of the whiskey. But because of the story, a lot of people gave them a pass on things. A lot of people wanted it to be better whiskey than what it may be. Now, it's won a lot of awards, and kudos to them for that. It's not something that I ever cared for. Early on, I think it was being sourced from Dickel. If you know anything about me, you know that I do not care for George Dickel products. I had all the Flintstone vitamins I needed before I was 10 years old. I don't need it anymore. That it was being sourced there. Then I think it went to Tennessee Distilling Group for an extended period of time. Now, apparently, they are at least putting in barrels their own product. But yeah, this is just going to be an interesting story to follow. And I hope it all works out well for everybody. I don't wish any ill will on anybody that's involved. But we've got a series of events that have an impact on how potential lenders and potential investors look at the whiskey industry, the bourbon business. You look at Garrett County. I mean, to me, that looks like a whole lot of mismanagement to barely get up and running and then have to shut down after hiring a prominent distiller. I don't know any other way to look at that other than this has just been mismanaged. Kentucky Owl, I don't know what Stoley was thinking with their whole theme park distillery thing. You remember when Vegas decided they're going to be kid friendly? How long did that last? It didn't. Then they figured out, oh, wait a minute. Parents want to get away from their kids when they come to Vegas. They don't want to have their kids tag along. And I just don't see that you would want to, make whiskey a family affair kind of thing. But Kentucky Owl, again, appears to be lots and lots of just poor decisions. And then, you've got what's going on with Uncle Nearest, that brand. Just a whole lot of bad decision making at least, poor performance at least. And, It takes a lot of money to start a business. Any business of any size, it's going to take a lot of money. It takes a lot of money in the whiskey business, because you're either having to source product, bottle that product, build a brand around that product, and your margins are relatively thin if you're sourcing, because you're paying a whole lot more for that aged whiskey. So you got to have some capital behind you, and or you've got to have a whole lot of patience. And if you have a whole lot of patience, you've got to have some capital behind you. Now, you may sell, a lot of distilleries will sell vodka or sell gin until the whiskey that they've distilled is ready to roll. And if you can do that, good on you. That's great. But now we're in a situation where legitimate distilleries that are doing the best out there to create a brand and create a good product they're trying to they're facing a more uphill battle than normal, because all of these bankruptcies and lawsuits from contractors and lawsuits from financial institutions are tainting the way other potential lenders or other potential investors are looking at the industry as a whole. And of course, media, they jump all over it. And these same stories that I've just talked about, not necessarily the Uncle Nearest one because it's fairly fresh, but the others are recycled time and time and time and time and time again by different media outlets. And they're acting like this is something that's just happened, and they're the ones that are breaking the news. But actually, they're basically repeating a story that was in the Lexington Herald Leader 3 months ago. So there are problems, and the bourbon boom had to die out at some point. You can't continue on that kind of trajectory forever. Things change, but if you look at some of the metrics, they're positive. 2024 was a record year for bourbon sales. Okay. Big investments from projects at some of the big boys, Evan Hill, Buffalo Trace, Four Roses. They've all poured millions, if not billions of dollars into their facilities. 2025 looks pretty flat from a sales standpoint, but from a bourbon tourism standpoint, it continues to grow. In Louisville, Whiskey Row in Louisville, you've added tasting rooms for Whiskey Thief, a restaurant for Monk's Road, tasting room for Green River, and you've got a couple that are on the way, one from Pursuit Spirits and another from Whistlepig. So bourbon tourism still going. These places don't stay open if people aren't coming to visit, and people are continuing to come to visit. The common theme, one common theme in these distilleries that have had these problems is they've required large capital investment. Okay. So they're building a huge campus, $250 million project, $150 million project, to build a big visitor center and distillery and huge stills and rick houses and state-of-the-art rick houses and all of this. Those huge investments. And those tend to be the ones, or seem to be the ones, that have had the most problems. The ones that have been less capital intensive, that may be a brand that sources and doesn't have their own that distillery cost to cover or that distillery loan to pay for, they seem to be faring better. But I will say, if you like a brand, support that brand. It doesn't matter who it is. I mean, Wild Turkey's not going anywhere. Bullet's not going anywhere. But both of them have seen off years. Brown Foreman seen an off year. Again, they're not shutting their doors, but they will make adjustments to their workforce. So if there's a brand you love, support that brand, especially if it's a craft brand. You can make a big difference there, and a bigger difference than you may even know. Buy a bottle, buy 2 bottles, buy a case. Support them on social media. You've got Facebook, you've got Instagram, Twitter, X. Sorry, Elon. Whatever you may have, share your favorite distilleries posts, especially the craft distilleries. Help them out, because it's a very competitive market, however you slice it. And you've got a lot of brands chasing a fairly stagnant number of dollars that are in play from consumers. Support them. It makes a difference. So that is my little take on where we are in the whiskey industry. There's a lot of really great stuff going on out there. There's some good innovation going on out there. We're just dealing with a time that it's not all good news like it was a few years ago. And there's still a lot of things that are going to shake out. We may not have seen, we probably haven't seen the last of distilleries having to reorganize or maybe even consolidate. I don't know. There's a lot of different things that can happen here. But look to the positive when you can. Support the ones that are out there that you like, that will appreciate your support, because there are a lot of great brands out there. The brands that have hit struggles, other than Uncle Nearest, I really haven't tried a whole lot of their product. Tried some of the Luca Mariano a few times, a little bit of Kentucky Owl here and there, but that product has changed so much in the last 5 or 6 years. I don't know that I'd recognize it. But go out and support the ones that you love and that you enjoy, and it'll make more of a difference than what you think. So that's my show on this. I want to tell you again, you can watch this show on YouTube. As you probably know, if you're watching on YouTube right now, you can listen on your favorite podcast platform, which if you're listening on a podcast right now. We also have a Facebook page where we post all of our shows, including this one. Facebook group where you can come in and you can post what you think. Post the brands that you're supporting. Let's hear it. Get out there. Would love to know the brands that you're behind. Wild Turkey. I love Wild Turkey. Support them too. Four Roses. Yeah, they're great. Let's support them. Hey, MB Rowan. Yeah, let's support these folks. Let's support Deerhammer. Let's support Buzzard Juice. Let's support Peerless. Let's support them all. Okay, let's support all the good ones. The ones that are doing things the right way. So until next time, I want to thank you very much for listening and indulging my rambling for the last 39 and a half minutes. Be sure to tune in next week. We'll have some music stuff going on the show. Cheers. Night.